Masters, masters, masters of change.
Welcome to Masters of Change. My name is Kim Cunio, and I'm the head of music at the Australian National University. And I'm here in a series of conversations with my good friend Charlie Hogg. Charlie is the director of the Brahma Kumaris here in Australia, and I'd like to welcome you yet again, Charlie.
Thank you so much, Kim. Lovely to be with you.
Now, Charlie, we've been having some very interesting discussions of late, and our last one in particular, where we introduced the idea of karma, and karma as a universal law. Now, this can be quite confronting to us. Could you tell us why it can be confronting?
Because I think, Kim, all of us have things happen in our life which we feel very bad about. Either some actions I've performed and I feel really heavy and guilty, or actions performed against me. And, I suppose I often feel there's two layers in life. There's the emotional layer, I get all emotional, but there's truth underneath it. There's a sort of, and I've got to, rather than look through the prism of emotion and all the feelings, which a lot of us, we all have been there, we all know that. Now what we're trying to do in our conversations, Kim, is sort of bed it into universal laws of truth that give us a context as to why things happen. The big questions, out of the blue, something seems to happen. And on the surface it's just come out of left field for no reason. But when you go deep, there's a reason. Nothing happens without a reason. And that's a truth which is embedded pretty deeply in me. And we've all balked at our things that have happened. But I love to think, well, this is embedded in my past in some way. And I'm not going to feel heavy about or bad from it, but I'm going to learn from it. I'm going to learn. It's come back. It's like an unfinished account that I have to deal with.
Charlie, this is a beautiful introduction to the topic. I wanted to ask you a question about what we try and do as humans to reinforce karma, because it seems like we make laws and we have punishments. So on some level, we do acknowledge the universality of this law, because particularly if someone murders someone else, or someone steals, or does a horrific crime, we actually feel as a society that we need to do something about that action.
We absolutely do, Kim, because it says, doesn't it, that we all have a sense of a universal truth, that there is some behaviour which is appropriate in life, and if we transgress those laws, then we have to pay for it. And what you just said was so interesting, because you talked about murder. Now, if someone murders someone with intent, that's called murder. They can often go to jail for life. If someone kills someone and they didn't intend, it's called manslaughter. So it shows us that even in the laws of the land, the intent is what is really important. And so when the intent wasn't to kill somebody, but the result was the death, the result in both, whether intent or not, is someone has died. And so the law takes that into account, the laws of the land. And it's the same in the laws of spirituality. It's the intent which is really what we have to watch. And that's why I think in our last episode, you and I had a lot of discussions around why we meditate is we create a high awareness, and the intents coming out of that colour my actions are elevated actions.
Yes, this is how you're talking about this beautiful thing that we can settle karma.
Yeah.
And I wanted to give a little example. Say, for example, we keep meeting people who are angry in our daily life. And we can go on one level, why is this happening to me? I only just dealt with someone angry and now I'm dealing with them again. And then potentially we can stop that.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you, how can we stop that?
Fundamentally by not reacting. It's almost like we buy into a karmic account. If someone's really angry and now you need to be quite strong spiritually, and you don't buy into it, you almost guarantee they will cool down. But if you allow that anger to inflame you and you buy in and hit back, you will increase. So almost instantly you're watching the karmic story at play. But if you refuse to keep buying into increasing an account with another person, in time, really, people cool down. And I've had that experience myself. Once I was interviewed on radio here in Australia, and someone was interviewing me about meditation, and he was quite aggressive about, meditation, and he went on and on and on at me, and I'm not very good at responding at those things, so I just remained quite calm and laughed a bit. And suddenly he said, Charles, I've insulted you, I've done this to you, I've done that to you, and you haven't reacted. Maybe there is something in this meditation. So it was almost like, not reacting sometimes or helps you change the dynamic of a karmic story.
Yeah, so, dear friends, what Charlie's saying to us is that we can be the experimenters of our karmic destiny.
Yeah, beautiful.
And I'd like to really encourage all of us to take one aspect of our life from today's episode and apply this understanding, because karma is not just a wheel of cause and effect, it's our teacher.
Yes.
It's an ability to understand the nature of the universe. That's what Charlie is saying to us. So let's find one little thing that pushes our buttons and have a strong resolve to not react. And then let's keep that answer in our hearts. What has changed? And Charlie, you've said already what has changed. You feel, I think, that this is possible for all of us.
Kim, it's so possible. I've practiced that on numerous occasions, and even I've practiced packing up overthinking, because I might not react through my mouth or even my face, but sometimes the reaction stays mentally. You walk away and you haven't reacted and you think, God, could you believe what they said? Or so in a way I'm still holding it, but even letting it go at that level. And I think it's really interesting how you feel. I think you feel so good inside because you've behaved according to your highest karmic possibilities, so to speak. You feel better. Your self-respect goes up when you don't keep overreacting, giving sorrow, but it needs a spiritual strength to be able to do that.
Charlie, this is a very beautiful teaching because it's positive. You're saying to all of us that really all of us are good people.
Yeah.
All of us, nearly all the time, want to do the right thing. But something comes up in the way, and it's like our brain is short-circuited and it goes to mud. And, and then only later do we go, oh, did I do that? Surely not. And yet it takes so much effort to clean up the mess later. And you're saying is a little bit of preventative medicine can make our lives just truly wonderful.
Kim, I used to teach meditation in the main jail here in Sydney. And once there was a prisoner and we were talking about this law of karma. And he became quite emotional and he was incredibly articulate. And he said, I've got such a temper, I can't control it. When anger comes in me, I killed somebody. He felt so bad about it. Then he went into jail and the same thing happened and he killed a warder. He killed one of the jailers. But he was just saying it's like sometimes the power of my weakness is so strong, it sort of bulldozes your rational intellect. Your intellect, which is holding and telling you, now don't say that, don't do this because you're going to increase the account. It just pushes it over. The emotion is so strong. You perform the action in a split second of emotion, and then the regret, oh, I said that, oh, I did that. Who doesn't know that? But what spirituality is, it empowers you not to do those actions, which then, as you said, you create a mess in your life. You spend sometimes the rest of your life mopping up that mistake in the instant because of emotion.
Yes, I don't want to be flippant here, but I wanted to ask you a question about an analogy, because when we were young, we all played snakes and ladders. And I love this game because we go up, it might take 12 ladders to go up and up and up and up, but one snake can take us right down to the beginning.
That's so true, isn't it?
It seems like whoever designed that
Yeah.
game was very aware of the law of cause and effect, because it takes a lot of constant work to ascend, but
Yeah.
one moment of weakness can ruin a
Yeah.
life. And what Charlie is saying is so important, that
Yeah.
if we know that we all have a tendency towards a certain weakness, we need to be the guardians of our own minds
We
to
do.
not fall down that ladder.
And I think the longest snake is ego, because our ego is so strong. And there's a part of me who knows I'm making a mistake, but I just can't stop. I have to sort of tell somebody off or correct them or do an action. And even often I know the consequences, but I don't have the power over my own ego. And this really, I think this whole sort of spiritual life is understanding this and starting to dismantle that ego that keeps influencing my actions, my behavior, my relationships, and creating destinies that I don't want. And then I blame people and I blame others, but actually it's my ego that is the problem in the first place.
Now, from that, I want to ask a question. Do we affect our own health through
Yeah.
these things? Because it's my feeling we do. Could you talk in some detail? Because this is, again, very confronting. I'm a good person. Why did I get sick?
Yeah.
Which is a very understandable reaction. I'd like you to give us that spiritual perspective on sickness.
Yeah. And maybe to contextualize that, Kim, I think that we create and settle karma in four main areas: the mind, our thoughts; the body, our health; relationships, our emotional health; and then our material things. But with the body, I think it's really fascinating. And once I was in a school in South Africa, and I was giving a talk, and someone asked about the psychosomatic nature of the mind, that do emotions create illness? And I said, well, a lot of research says so, but I'm not an expert in it. But afterwards, the principal came to me and said, I really believe in that. He said, so many times my teachers have had a hard time in the classroom, the kids have given them a hard time. They're down, they're a bit depressed, unhappy, and the next day they ring up and they've got a cold. Because we know when you're emotionally low or you're negative, your immune system is weaker and you will get sick. And there's actually a friend of ours, as we know, Neville, who lives in the UK, who wrote a book called Will to Be Well. And Neville is sort of a very well-known journalist in health and science. And when you open that book, it's just a little statement. It says, the greatest factor in good health is happiness. And it goes on, it's good to exercise, it's good to eat well, it's good to sleep well, but ultimately, happiness strengthens your immune system. So when you do good actions and you're happy, you will be more resilient to illness. You still will get illness, but you'll have more resilience to illness. But when we're performing repeated actions, and sometimes, I often just imagine if your mind is like a little energy beacon that's just sending out vibrations, it's sitting here, it's going to affect the units of matter of this body, isn't it? The energy. So if the energy is of anger, and sometimes I think a lot of us have a lot of suppressed anger. We don't show it. Passive anger is much more influential than the active anger. We don't show it, but we're really inside. That's going to, when it's constant, affect my health.
Yes, Charlie, when I hear you speak, I also want to really take note of the fact that you're being so compassionate. You're not saying to anyone, you're sick because you've been a bad person. We're not literally blaming people here, are we? We're saying that the universe, it's a mystery until we examine ourselves.
Yeah.
And at some point, through the journey of suffering that illness provides, we have the opportunity to really examine our lives in depth.
We do, Kim. And I mean, I've been sick. I'm sure you've been sick. We've all been sick because we all have a karmic account. And you know, research into this is quite fascinating because there's a lot of research into fear and heart disease. Because, you know, if someone was to run into this room now and say there's a fire, what's the first thing that happens? Boom, 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 boom. If every day we step into work, you know, step into the day and I go to work and I have fear of my boss, I have fear that I may fail, I have fear that I may not be good enough, that emotion is constantly pressuring my heart, and the heart's just a little pump. And that's why meditation, spirituality is such a good investment in well-being, because the more you're relaxed and the more you don't suppress your fears, but you begin to understand where fear comes from. It's an investment not just in your happiness, but even in your physical well-being too.
And you're describing fear, Charlie, as an important part of life because it's like our self-defense mechanism.
Yeah.
It tells us that there is a danger for us, but we shouldn't be ruled by it. And because we have a higher reasoning, if we have repeated acts of fear that come to us, we can take the time to reflect on our lives and make structural changes so that we do not subject ourselves to that fear. And I'm immediately thinking of the thousands and the millions of women who are subjected to violence in the home when you see this. Because it's a big thing in Australia, even a developed country, that it can take a woman years to be able to move beyond that systemic violence in the home. And when they do, it's amazing the profound level of recovery people can do, even after years or decades of abuse.
Yeah, it's so true, Kim. And it's one of the sort of fascinating aspects you've brought up about karma, which is we learn from example. And unfortunately, in families, there's repeated behaviours from generation to generation. So when a little boy observes his father being violent with his mother, what does he learn? And unfortunately, sociology tells us this can go for generations and generations until there's some awareness in one of these men or people in the family that actually I have to stop this behaviour. So it's amazing. The law of karma works on many levels, but example, isn't it? If I am an example and people learn good behaviour, that also influences my positive karma. But if I'm an example of bad behaviour, I also carry that karmic burden along with my own bad behaviour, the one who's learned the bad behaviour. And this is why this is the effects of the law of karma go into every little nook and cranny of life.
Charlie, this gives me goosebumps actually, because it says that, not only do we serve ourselves, which is important, on some level we are all selfish, because there's no doubt that no one thinks about ourselves more than we do, no matter how much someone else cares about us. But what you're saying is, we often talk about society, and we're talking a lot about society in our conversations. Almost the ultimate service of society is to break the cycle of negative karma.
It is.
We can make such a difference to the structures around us by doing this.
Kim, one of the things that changed my life is, when I was about 17 years old, I was in the city where you work, Canberra, and I actually, it was the time of the Vietnam War, and I went on a demonstration and against the war. And one thing led to another. I won't go into the detail, but I was arrested with 250 other young students and put in the federal prison. Because I was sort of, out for peace, a so-called peace activist. And, we spent the night singing John Lennon songs, things like that. It was the 1970s. But when we began to talk, all those of us in the cell, I began to realise that we were such an angry group of people. And it just dawned on me so profoundly, deeply, that what we were doing is we were protesting against the war, the manifestation between countries. But it's almost like we were creating war with our own relationships and our own families. Anger is the seed. And so until I really look at my own anger, what is war? It's the manifestation of all of our individual anger. And really the world will not ever be rid of war until we as human beings take responsibility for the war we make in our own homes and our own relationships almost every day.
Yes, Charlie, you're speaking about this very profound teaching, really, which is we must be the change we want.
We have to be the change.
Yep.
Yeah.
And yet, then the understanding of karma is a liberation in this,
Yeah.
because it's saying that if there is something that's going on every level of life and society, we can either fight it or we can win with it. And you're saying to us that it's worth having a go to the best of our abilities.
Absolutely, Kim, because we can break the cycle. We can break the cycle of these endemic behaviours that our societies are just so caught up in. When I do it individually, it's actually contributing in the long term to a better world.
Well, Charlie, I think it's time we sustain ourselves, nourish ourselves, and I'd like you to take us on an inner journey to understanding and resolving karma.
Let me sit. And in just a second, turn my mind within, from wandering outside and analyzing and processing. I now turn within. And in the eye of my mind, I see myself as the eternal soul, the spark of life energy. I'm meditating because I want to create a beautiful future. I want to do actions that bring me and others happiness. But I'm also meditating to settle the accounts I've collected from the past. I realize I wasn't aware of these actions. So it's not that I'm a bad person, I just performed actions in body consciousness. And to begin the journey of settlement, I turn my mind to the divine, to God. And I see the one who's beyond karma, who's beyond action, the one who's eternally pure and eternally peaceful. And I absorb myself in the light of God. And the more my whole mind, my heart, absorbs in the beauty of this relationship, I literally feel the effect of my past reduces. It's almost like the power of my past karma is weakened as I step into my original power as a pure soul. To really heal the effect of my past story, which can be like a shadow over my present. I need to remember God regularly. Not just when I meditate, but as I walk, as I move around. The more I absorb in the love of this relationship, the more I clear the account of my past. And the more I clear these accounts, I feel light. A beautiful feeling comes inside it's a lightness, a freedom. Like a freedom from my own weakness and my own negativity. Om Shanti.
Dear friends, Charlie's taken us on an inner journey where we sow the seeds of the love of God. And by sowing these seeds, anything is possible. Isn't that a beautiful thought? No matter how much we've suffered, no matter how much we've made others suffer, this simple surrender to the love of God can help us right now. And by meditating, we can release more and more of these profound karmic accounts. We can make a difference in our lives and in the world. This is such a positive message you've given us today, Charlie. I want to thank you, and I want to wish everyone all the best in such a difficult time. Sometimes it's very hard to take this understanding on. So from Charlie and I, we wish you good luck in this great adventure. May you be the masters of your own destiny. May you be the masters of change.